Hello and welcome to another episode of Frame and Reference. I'm your host, Kenny McMillan, and today we have a very special episode with Steve Gaynor, ASC, the curator of the ASC Museum. Ostensibly, Steve came over to talk about this show, Puppy Place, that he shot, but instead we got not the longest podcast I've ever recorded. I have chopped those down, but it will be the longest you will have heard. It was just story time with Steve, and I don't want this to sound like it's a bad thing or that I'm, making fun or anything. I had one of the best times ever because A, I didn't have to do anything, but B, it's just fascinating stories coming from Steve. I ate up every second. The time flew by. I think my second question legally came in at like the hour and a half mark. So, Steve is so awesome, man. Like I said, I felt like, I don't know what I felt like. It was just a lot of fun listening to him, talk about his history and just people he interacted with and stuff he's done. And it's just super rad. So I'm going to let you experience it the way I did, which is just to sit back and enjoy. So here's my conversation with Steve Gaynor, ASC. So the way that we start all these podcasts is just by kind of getting a quick lowdown on how you got started artistically. Obviously, music seems to be a big part of your life, but were you always a visual person, or did you kind of come into it from a different skill set, or how'd that come about?
When I was in 8th grade, I had a photography class. And we had a little twin lens reflex that everyone was given in the class. They had 120 film, I think, in it. And you spool it around and go around. They said, okay, go take artistic photographs. So, I went out and shot a bunch of stuff and nothing came out. There was nothing on the roll. I didn't have a light meter, so I don't know how I'm doing. And I don't know what to stop to set the lens at. So that got me thinking. I'm like, all right, this cannot conquer me. I'm going to conquer this. So I managed to find somewhere in my parents' or my grandparents' house a little Yashica still camera, and I got some 35 millimeter film, and I started shooting, and I still didn't have a light meter, but I reasoned enough to bracket exposures, and I kept a little logbook on what I was doing, and so after 2 or 3 rolls, I started to see what was working and what wasn't working. In daylight, at a certain shutter speed, I could go to a certain f-stop and I would get a reasonable exposure. And I played with that for a couple of years and I forgot about it. And so then, I'm out playing in heavy metal bands. And when I finally got out here to Hollywood with the band, we were talking about doing photos, and I was like, well, I think I can take some photos, So I went to a pawn shop that's actually still there. I saw it on Highland the other day when I was driving by. I was like, oh my God, a guy tried to sell me a guitar when I went, no, I need a camera. He's like, no, you got long hair. You need a guitar. I got a guitar. So I bought the camera and I started playing, and still without a light meter. And I managed to get some reasonably good shots. And then I forgot about that. So then I reached the age of 26. And I'm sleeping on a friend of mine's sofa. And I had a Marshall half stack, a Les Paul, and my clothes were like in a hefty bag. All right. And I'm sleeping on the sofa. And I sat up one morning and I said, my God, I can't do this anymore. Right. And the words of my father, that son of a bitch, were echoing in the back of my head. You better have something to back that music up. I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to do? And about this time, my roommate came out and she was like, what's wrong with you? I'm like, I can't do this. I need a job. And she goes, this producer that I was chatting with last night said he's looking for a good PA. And I go, I'll do that. Whatever that is, I'm in.
Yeah.
And should I continue that story? Because it's very
absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. So I went over to this guy's house, right? And it's a mess. It's up in Beverly Glen. It's still there. And it's a mess. And I go in there and I'm like, look, I hear you're looking for PA. He's like, yeah. I go, I'll do it. He goes, how much do you want? I go, I don't care. He goes, are you in like recovery or something? What are you doing? I'm like, no, I need a gig. And he's like, okay, you're the PA. So here's a list of stuff. Go to the store and buy all this stuff for Crafty and such. And we were shooting these infomercials. Now this is a real oddity because they don't really exist anymore, but what they were like a half hour or hour long commercial that proposed to be a host, like, Johnny Carson or somebody like that. And a guest would come on with something that they're trying to market, right? Like, and today we have Dr. Vincent, and he's coming on with his fantastic new Zoom H4. And so then they would sell the thing. And so I PA'd, and I did a great job. And the guy's a heavy smoker, right? And he's like, "You want another job?" And I'm like, "Yes." And he goes, "I want you to clean my house." I'm like, "Oh my God." Same pay? He's like, "Yep." I'm like, "All right, I'll do it." So I cleaned his house. Now I'm making a little money. I'm making $60 a day or $40 a day, whatever it is. And I'm cleaning his house. And then I'm running to the store and getting supplies for shoots. And we're doing all these silly infomercials. And in the interim, I'm vacuuming down this hallway, right? And they had a room. And in that room was a 3/4 inch edit machine, right? And because they shot on 3/4 tape. And the editor's in there, and you'd put an in point and an out point, and you'd hit preview, and the tapes would roll back, and then it would show you what your edit was. Well, I'm vacuuming by, and I pretty much worn the carpet out outside of the edit room. The guy finally turns around and goes, "You want to come in and check this out?" I'm like, "Yeah." I turn the vacuum out. I go in, and he shows me how the two knobs work and how you put an in point in and an out point in, and then how you record it. And I'm like, "Great." And he goes, "Okay, goodbye." So I'm back out cleaning. He had this thing where he lived next door. Who's the mom in Poltergeist? The actress. She's got like a three-word name or something.
Yeah, I'd have to look that up.
Yeah, that's okay. You work on that. She had a couple of like Great Danes, and he had like a couple of Rottweilers or whatever, right? And so he had gotten himself into some sort of bizarre battle with her.
Joe Beth Williams?
That's her. By throwing his dog poop over the fence into her yard, and she in turn would throw his dog poop and her dog poop in his. So by the time I get out there, there's like, the Great Pyramid of dog crap in the backyard. I'm like, oh my God, so I dive into that. A couple of weeks later, the editor's not in, and the guy comes in and goes, "Don't you know how to run this machine?" I go, "Yeah." He goes, "Sit down. I'll show you where I want the edits." So I sit down and I'm doing this, and pretty soon he's like, "All right, keep going. I'm an editor."
Right.
Right. That's my film school, right? Vacuuming. So I'm editing. And then now we're 6 months down the line. There's been several more shoots. And I'll never forget this lady. You could probably find her on Google. Her name was June Kane Miller. This was the subject of this documentary. I mean, infomercial. It should be a documentary about it. And I'm editing, and in one shot, she's like this. And in the next shot, she's like this. So it jumped when I tried to cut it together because it didn't match. And he hears me cussing away in the edit room, and he comes in and says, "What's wrong with you?" I'm like, "It doesn't match. Look, it doesn't cut." The DP at that time, he didn't tell her what to do to match, or the director didn't catch it. I don't even know if we had a scripty at that point, but
I was going to say, yeah,
not a chance
for an infomercial. Yeah,
no, probably not. So he took another drag off his cig, and he goes, "You think you're so damn smart? You shoot the next one." So what I did was I hired the best gaffer I could find, the best key grip I could find, 3 ace camera operators and camera assistants. I figured, how can I fail? If I surround myself with greatness, and to this day, I still do this, you surround yourself with great people, the chances of your failure are very, very slim, because no matter how dumb you are and how many silly things you do, they'll catch you, and they'll pick you up. And some of those people actually are still friends with me. Now, this is a long, long time ago. Okay. This is in 1989, maybe. So, I'm shooting. Okay. So I'm shooting. So then, I figure, okay, well, I'll just, hop down to Paramount and become a cinematographer and shoot movies.
Sure. Here's your application, sir.
It was almost that easy. I was out and around shooting some things, and I heard this guy talking, and he goes, if you go down to the Paramount camera department, they'll show you how to load film into the magazines for the multi-camera TV shows. And So I was like, well, all right. So he gave me the number. I called, and the guy who answered is a guy named Rudy Pajoyo. He's still a really dear friend of mine. I love Rudy to death. And I go, hey, Rudy, this is Steve Gaynor, and so said you'd show me how to load the mags. He didn't know who the hell so-and-so was. It could have been an exec. The back lot of studio is a crazy place. There's all kind of politics and nut jobs. But he goes, come
Still
on down.
Office.
Yeah, he goes, I'll call you a pass at at the gate on is it Lemon Grove. And I go, great. So I cruise down there. And as I'm walking in, now this is pre 9/11, of course. As I'm walking in, there's a guard there, and I go, hi, I'm Steve Gaynor. I'm going to be working at Paramount Camera Department. And he looked at me and he goes, hi, I'm John. I work at this gate. Nice to meet you. Went in, he showed me how to load the mags, gave me a quick golf cart ride around the lot, and then dropped me off at the gate and goes, goodbye. So I walked out, and the next day I didn't have anything to shoot. So I went back down to Paramount. I looked, and John was at the gate. And as I walked through, I just waved and walked right into the studio and went into the camera department. I said, where's the broom? Where's the broom? So
I've trained for this.
Yeah. So I'm really good at it. So over the next 3 months, 4 months, anytime I wasn't working, I was down there, and pretty soon they were like, well, where's Steve? Can Steve go over to stage 4 and do this? Can he? And I hit a certain point where the head of the camera department called me into his office, and he's like, all right, what do you want? Why? What's going on? And I said, I want to be a cinematographer. And he laughed at me. He's like, you'll never be a cinematographer. All right. By the way, this time I still had my long hairband hair.
Right.
He goes, what do you really want to do? And I go, I want to be a film loader at the camera department. He goes, now that I can help you with. So he put me in the union. He got me my 30 days, and I got in the union. And so within 2 months, the same guy comes down. It's always been some sort of father figure guy coming down and talking down to me. This guy was like, you know how to run a film lab? I'm like, no, but I know how to read books, and he's like, all right, well, we're going to open a film lab and I want you to run it. I'm like, okay. So Warner's had a film lab. So I went over there and I spent a lot of time with this very nice lady named Ursula over there. And she showed me the ropes, and it's really not that hard. We started out only with like a little C41, what you would shoot in your Instamatic camera machines. Right. And then we moved our way into doing Ektachrome, and then black and white, and then enormous dip and dunk black and white, everything. We really started it going. And at the same time, a very famous camera company, who's pretty easy to figure out. The very famous camera rental company had moved into a new location in Woodland Hills, and they had a bunch of big black and white prints that they needed made for that location. And I did some of those. And when they were sending them over, some of the executives were sending some of their personal stuff, and I think they call that a G job when you do a little, on the side type of thing. And by the way, during this time, I was still also doing G jobs for cinematographers that I saw, Vilmos. Okay, sure. What do you, anything you want, dude. I'm not, So sooner than later, that very famous camera rental company actually sent a camera package over on a Friday afternoon. It said, Steve, go shoot something. Your friends at, and yeah. And so while this happened, and I was going out to the stages, by the way, and like looking at how the cinematographers were working, because you got to remember, I was shooting before this with a 3/4 inch Sony video camera, or an Ikigami I had too. And yes, they both have lenses, and yes, they both capture images, but there is quite a bit of difference in the nuance of shooting some lady trying to sell, bananas on a stage versus a drama, or an action movie or something. So I went to the stages, I watched them all, and lo and behold, one of the guys, still a friend of mine, who was makeup artist on Deep Space Nine, had come out of Roger Corman's place. And he goes, hey, my friend over at Roger Corman is looking for somebody to shoot some second unit for him. And I was like, here's the guy right here. All right, here's the guy. So I called. They call me
the cleanup crew.
That's right. I called my friends at the famous camera rental house, and I said, hey, can I get another one, please? And they're like, here you go. So I roll into Roger Corman, right into Concord New Horizons in Venice. with a ridiculous package, everything, right? Their cameras, I get there, they had a bunch of old Aries, like an Arri BL2, BL3, BL4. They're taped together, like there's things missing off of them. There's no hand grips, there's nothing. So I come in with this expensive camera package, and they're blown away, and the head of the studio is like, well, how would you like to work here? And I'm like, well, let's see, $60 a day and nothing else, and no guarantee that I'm going to work tomorrow. Or I have a 5-day a week, 9 to 5 studio gig, full union benefits. And at that point, about a month of paid vacation a year. Right. Wow. I'm going to do yours because I wasn't married. I didn't have a mortgage and I didn't have any kids. And my mind said, if you're going to do it, go for it now. And see what happens. You can always beg your way back to Paramount or whatever. They love me over there, So
yeah.
I went and tell the boss, right? And I'm like, I'm gonna leave. And he's like, yeah, you got a ghost over there. He goes,
Diffusion popped.
He goes, if you stay, he goes, I'll give you 3 months a year paid vacation. And you can shoot a movie during that 3 months. I go, but you can't schedule a movie based on the DP's time off. So it won't work. So I left and I went to Roger Corman and I ended up shooting a bunch of features for him and second unit stuff for, I'm sure, movies. If they're still making movies now, they're still probably cutting some of my shots in. If they needed a doorknob or a bloody knife sliding across the floor, boy, I shot those. And it really moved from there. But once I'd gotten my feet as a cinematographer, an old friend of mine from Paramount said, hey, I want you to shoot a music video with me. And I'm like, okay. And I had a Bull X. So I went with my Bull X and there's this unknown brand new rap guy named Master P. Right. And so we shot a couple of videos for him and he became very popular at that time. And once he became popular, so did my director, this guy named Dave Myers. And Dave and I shot, probably 40 or 50 videos together, mostly for the No Limit guys and gals. And we shot a movie called Foolish, which was, it's not on the recommended viewing list, believe me. But, and that catapulted me. One of the last videos I did with Dave is Kid Rock, Ba Da Ba, which made Kid Rock this monster rocker guy, and made Dave a monster director and boosted my career through the moon. And I began shooting for everyone at that point. And so the music video world, great place to want to be artistic. That's your place, because even absolute failures sometimes are looked upon as, oh, that's kind of an artistic shot. You're like, that's really not what I had intended, but yeah, thanks. At least I know how to do it. So there were many, many, many opportunities in music videos to get as creative as I want. And at that point, I started collecting vintage cameras, motion picture cameras. And at one point I had around 50 35 millimeter hand crank movie cameras, not wind up, but actually hand crank cameras, and hundreds upon hundreds of lenses. I still do. I have lots of lenses and stuff. So I started shooting with these hand crank cameras a lot in the music videos, because why not? Just to see what would happen. The very first time I did it with Dave Myers, we shot it and we went in and looked at the footage that had been shot on a Panavision camera and the footage that had been shot on the hand crank camera. And he's like, I don't get it. What? It looks just almost exactly like that. What's the difference? And I realized, well, silent movies in their day were extraordinarily beautiful pieces of art. They weren't wiggly and scratchy and crappy looking, and they didn't run too fast. In the beginning, they ran at 15 frames per second, and they were pristine, first orthochromatic type negative, then Pancro. And the images were mind-blowingly beautiful. What's happened over the years, obviously, is the original nitrate prints and negatives shrank. And so that made them difficult. Yeah. That made them difficult to telecine. And then, and when they were telecining, guys would throw it up, not give a shit, put it at 24 frames, and it was shot at 16. So then you're looking like the Keystone Cops. It's stupid.
Right.
So I utilized my knowledge of vintage cameras one day. I heard that the ASC Clubhouse, now the ASC, the American Society of Cinematographers, is the dream for everyone, right?
Yeah,
this is
absolutely.
the dream. If you're a cinematographer and you're in the United States, it's fairly well your dream that you want to be a member of the ASC. Having those 3 letters after your name means that you've put in your dues. It means that you're capable. It means maybe that you're an artist, or that at the very least you're incredibly efficient and proficient at doing the craft. And so I'd never even been in the ASC Clubhouse, but I heard they had a vintage camera collection. So I'm like, I got to go check this out. So I drove over there. I'm in Hollywood. I drove over there and I rang the buzzer and they let me in. Right. So I walk in. It's really dark in there. And I see some figures, mingling in the back, and I see some vintage cameras. So I just kind of walked over by the cameras, and this guy goes, "Can we help you?" And I'm like, "Yes, sir. I just wanted to look at the vintage cameras." And he goes, "Please leave." And I was like, "Okay." That was Stanley Cortez. Okay. And he's was known for being a bit of a crank, but he was talking to Vilmos Zsigmond, which, to me, Vilmos is seminal cinematographer of the 70s. I mean, Deliverance. Come on. He's amazing. And Close Encounters, amazing. We were talking about aliens earlier. No one else knows what we were. And but I didn't give up. So I went back and they weren't there. And I hung out for a while. And someone walked by with a lens, and they go, "I don't know where this goes." And I go, "Oh, that's a Technicolor lens. It goes with the big blue Technicolor camera." And he goes, "How do you know that?" I go, "I collect cameras." I go, "By the way, who handles all these cameras?" And he goes, "I don't know. No one does. You'd have to talk to Victor." I go, "Victor?" He goes, "Yeah, Victor Kemper." I go, "Victor Kemper." And someone behind me went, "Yes." I turned around, and it was Victor Kemper. Victor Kemper shot Dog Day Afternoon. Victor Kemper shot Pee-wee's Big Adventure. The guy is versatile, okay? And a big hero of mine. And he goes, "Why don't you sit down? And when I'm done with this meeting, I'll come out and chat with you." This is at noon. I'm sitting there and watching the clock. It's like an old movie. The hands are going around. It's 5:00. And he walks out and he looks at it and he goes, "Oh, you're still here?" I'm like, "Yes, sir." And so we start talking. I tell him that I'm interested in taking care of the collection. I'm not trying to get a membership or any of that at this point. I hardly shot any movies. And
for anyone listening, don't ask for that.
Yeah, right. And so he said, "Okay, well, I'll run it by the Board of Governors and we'll see." And I'm like, "Thank you." Now, I've since learned that the Board of Governors at the ASC, and pretty much at any corporation or business or nonprofit, whatever it is, it's a treacherous, kind of a slimy slope to get involved in, because it takes them a long time to make decisions. You've got, in our case, we have a grouping of incredibly talented artists that are all sitting and that are opinionated and that are trying to make a decision on one little thing, and it can take sometimes months. So 6 months later, my phone rang. I had given up. I'm like, "Oh," anyway. And he goes, "Okay, I spoke to the board and they'd like for you to come in and talk to them." So I went into the board meeting, and sitting at the board meeting were a bunch of the DPs that I'd done G jobs for at Paramount in the photo lab. Yeah.
Yes.
And they're like, "Oh, Steve." And I'm like, "Oh, okay. Okay. Sweat stopped." And so I became the curator of the ASC Camera Museum, which I've done now for about 20 years. And a bunch of my cameras have moved in there. As you can see, I don't really have room for them. And plus, what are you going to do with an old film camera right now if you don't have the budget to shoot a bunch of film?
Yeah.
It's a great dust catcher, So my primary focus in the past 8 years or so has really been on lenses. And one of the things that inspired me the most is early on in my career, I read an ASC book that's called The Light on Her Face. It was written by Joseph Walker, ASC, who was Frank Capra's cinematographer on almost every film Frank Capra ever shot. And Joe was a lens nut, and he invented his own lenses. I have several. And he invented the zoom lens. He invented the spot meter. And when I would do music videos, since I lived down in Hancock Park, I would usually drive past Sunset Gower Stages, which is the old Columbia Studios, at 2 a.m. when we wrap. I'd roll down my window and go, "Hey, Joe Walker," because I knew no one had done that in 50 years or whatever. And one day, early on, 1998, in the infancy of eBay, I bought a leather camera case on eBay, and right in the beginning of eBay, believe it or not, you could click on someone's profile and see their phone number, their address, everything.
Yeah.
You know, and I guess after 10 or 20 people were murdered because of that, they stopped doing that, but or stalked. So this guy shows up at my house that sold me this thing and goes, "Hey, I want to take you down to Long Beach and show you this vintage camera." And I'm like, all right. So figuring that out, he would either kill me and then find me in, in San Pedro floating under the bridge or whatever. So he took me down there and there was a camera and it was a Mitchell camera. And it, in fact, belonged to one of Joseph Walker's camera assistants who had become a cinematographer later. And I saw a photograph of that guy. Al Keller was his name. And behind Al Keller was Joe Walker. So the guy that owned the camera store that had this camera came over and he goes, "So you want to buy this camera?" I go, not really. I go, "But you see that old guy in the background? If you ever had anything that belonged to that guy, I'd sure love to buy it." And he goes, "You mean Joe Walker?" And I'm like, and he goes, "I own his estate."
Oh, damn.
And I'm like, "Really? Okay, can I see it?" And he goes, "Why don't you come over to my place tonight?" So I drove with this guy back to Hollywood, got in my car, turned around and came back. And this guy had a huge barn and there were all these stacks of different things. I really should have paid more attention to what were in the other stacks too. I just didn't. But there was one stack that had yellow tape and it said Joseph Walker ASC. There were legal boxes. And I opened the first legal box and there was a handmade metal matte box with a huge iris in it. And it was stamped Bavaria, which dated it clearly to the 20s or earlier. And I just closed the box and I go, "How much?" And he goes, "For that box?" I go, "No, the whole stack." And he goes, "Well, here's the story. When Joe was about to die, he knew that no one in 1981, no one was interested in old camera stuff, let alone an inventor's lenses and things, right? So he gave them to Al Keller, who was his old assistant, and said, 'See if you can find somebody.'" So Joe died. And then like 6 months later, Al died. So his widow was stuck with all this crap. And she contacted the guy that owned his camera store and said, "Look, find somebody that knows who Joe Walker was." So he goes, "You're the only guy that I've ever met that knows who Joe Walker was. So, excuse me, how about $750 for the stack?" Here's the
think
check.
about it. Yeah.
No, I'm driving as quickly as possible away from Long Beach with all this stuff in the back. Now, believe me, when I say I had 50 cameras, having 50 cameras means you have 5,000 things, right? A camera, as you know, is not just a box. It's magazines and lenses and belts and cables and batteries. And so my apartment was pretty full and I was about to get married. So I was hastily going through my stuff and putting as much of it in the ASC as I could. And I got to Joe Walker stuff and I'm like, okay, I got to go through this shit. So I started going through it and there were 600 lenses, right? All kinds of vintage lenses, just amazing. And there were all of these different things that he had in there. One thing was a tweed box. And inside of the tweed box was a wooden box that had a lens on one end and a meter in it. And I'm like, I'm going to close it. Got married, moved into our house and all this. And then now I'm really trying to get rid of stuff because now, her stuff is here too, right? So you cohabitate and you find that you have to lose some stuff, right? So
that's how you end up with the music studio.
This is how you end up with your own studio, the man cave.
How I ended up with this office.
Or not, sometimes you don't get that. And I have friends that don't, and they're not as happy as I am. So,
yeah.
So I go back through this stuff and I open that tweed box. Now I've been at the ASC now for, 6 years or something like that. And I was even in the letterhead of the magazine. It says Museum Curator Steve Gaynor. I'd been shooting some features. I had shot Bully by that time and they'd, done some features on me and in the magazine. So I open this box and I pull the thing. I'm like, what in the hell is this thing? And I look, and in the paper lining of the box is a note. And I pull this note out and in two handwritings, one, which was Joe Walker's earlier handwriting, it said, "My comparator makeup meter. This was the original spot meter."
Oh,
and
wow.
Written in his really old handwriting, it said, "For the ASC Museum, ?
That's amazing.
My mind exploded. I'm like, what are the chances that this stuff, just this detritus, is going to float around Southern California, not go in the landfill, end up in a barn in Long Beach, and I'm going to be the one that goes and picks it up. And 2 years later, or whenever I finally open it, it's going to say for me. And so I rushed it over to the clubhouse, right? And in one of our display cabinets, I cleared a bunch of stuff out and I just put it there and I put the note up and all because it was meant to be. Yeah. Did it have anything to do with me yelling for him at the studio later? Hey, Joe Walker. I don't know, man. Maybe I touched some sort of spiritual bond or something. Or maybe it was just that I was so focused on him and his legacy that, you know, it's just a rare occurrence. I don't know. I think something's up there. I mean, it's for ASC Museum. I'm the only curator. And I'm the one person out of millions, you know, and there are loads of other camera collectors in the world, you know, and camera houses and stuff. I don't know. So from that point on, and like I said, that was about the time I shot Bully, which I'll briefly give you how I got the job Bully. Bully was the first feature where I was ever noticed for anything because the Roger Corman movies were awful. Okay. It wasn't anyone's fault in particular. The lights that they had were archaic. The equipment they had was horrible. The crew were a bunch of young people that didn't know what to do and didn't know how to do. And the actors were usually actors who were maybe slightly past their peak, you know, maybe heading deep into the recesses. So I was shooting a music video and I flew to New York City to shoot a Memphis Bleak Jay-Z music video. And the line producer on this video that I had shot, which was called Hootie Hoo for Master P, said, you know, there's this guy named Larry Clark, and he directed this movie called Kids. And he goes, he has another movie coming up. And he goes, I think you'd be really good for it. He goes, he said he wants it handheld, sweaty, no makeup, no Hollywood look, just raw, you know, raw emotion feeling. I'm like, oh, well, that doesn't sound, you know, at that point, I'm like, I want to do huge diffusion, big puffy Roger Deakins shots. You know, that's what I want to do. So, yeah. And all praise to Roger Deakins, by the way. Of course. My ultimate hero. I mean, and
don't get us both struck by lightning.
probably one of the sweetest human beings in the world too. Just so giving. We can talk about that later. But
I got to meet him at the book signing the other month.
He's lovely, isn't he?
Yeah, very, very nice. I could feel James just pushing him forward, like, "Don't be shy. Come on. They're here to see you. Quit being shy."
No, he's so wonderful. She is as well. But so I go to New York, and where Larry Clark lives, and so I can give him a call. So I call him, "Yeah, Larry, you know, my name's Steve Gaynor. I really want to shoot your movie. Can I buy you breakfast? We'll talk about it." Yeah, sure. So I go down to Soho, and we meet for breakfast, and we're sitting there, and he goes, "So what do you think about the movie?" I go, "Well, I feel like it should be like handheld and they should be sweaty and like no makeup." And as I'm looking at him, he's like choking on his eggs. He's like, "You sound great. I want you to shoot the movie."
Nailed it.
That's how I got that movie. And, but it truly was a great experience. Larry, first of all, is a great photographer. His entire life was spent in photography. His mom was a baby photographer. And he, from like age 4 onward, helped in her studio. So he gets it. And he went to Vietnam in 1964 or whatever, and came back in 66 or 67 to Tulsa, where he's from. And everyone in Tulsa that had been his friends were on speed. They'd all started shooting speed, and they'd all become, you know, older teens or in their early 20s. And so the whole scene was like speed freaks and orgies, and, you know, it's the late 60s, you know. And he just happened to have a Leica and started shooting these things. After a while, he had a collection of these photographs that ultimately became the book Tulsa. And that book projected him into into the history books, really. When I was working with him, we used to joke, at that point, autographed copies of Tulsa were selling for $5,000 a piece. And I'm like, "Hey, Larry, I saw one of your books on eBay for $5,000. He's like, "I don't get any of that fucking money." So we did that movie, and then at the premiere at the Egyptian, Gregor Rocky came up to me and said, "I love your movie. Can you do that but make it look pretty?" I have a movie called Mysterious Skin that I'd like for you to do. And I went, okay, sure, I can do that. So that's when I became involved with that group of people. And Joe Gordon-Levitt and I became really close friends. He is an incredible actor and an incredible human being. And if you haven't gone to Hit Record or Hit Record, however you choose to pronounce it, go there and check it out. It's an amazing amalgam of different types of art. And he drives that still to this day. He's tweeting about it on a daily basis and challenging people. So
easily like 4 times a day, I see like, hey, do you want to get into voice acting? Submit right here. Just do it.
You know, he's real. He's the real deal. And he's an exciting person. So I shot that movie, and I shot a litany of forgettable sorts of relatively low budget movies. 2008 was brutal. 2008 is when the writer's strike happened. Okay.
Right.
I had just finished shooting The Punisher Warzone, which was my first bigger, it was a $45 million budget. Right. And I thought, well, I'm on my way now. Right. I mean, I've shot a $45 million movie. These $20 million movies should run to me. Right. And the writer's strike. Nobody works for a year. And an interesting thing happened. At that point, all of those middle movies vanished. And there were either these super low budget movies that I didn't want to do, or there were these $150 million, which I couldn't do. Right. Well, I mean, I could have, but, you know, I would go to one of these meetings and it'd be like, you know, John Toll would be walking out. And I'm like,
right,
what am I doing here? Right. Because at that point, everyone was desperate, you know, to find work. And so I worked on this really cheesy Bruce Willis, 50 Cent, and Ryan Felipe movie. Yeah, called Setup. And while I was in Michigan shooting it, this is back when Michigan was a super hot place to shoot, you know, and then they ended the tax credit and that ended that. But, and you know, the snow was up like 3 feet, and I'm talking to my wife on the phone, and the baby's crying, and she's like, I don't know what to do. You know, he won't stop crying. I got to go do this. And did you send the check? I'm like, ugh. And I get a phone call, and this lovely person said, hi, my name is Lauren, and I've just shot a pilot for a TV show on MTV, and it's called Awkward. Actually, at that time, it was called That Girl, like the Marlo Thomas thing back in the 60s. But, you know, they put the kibosh on that. No money, no That Girl. Yeah. So it became known as Awkward. And I watched the pilot, and I read some scripts, and I was like, you know, this means that I could stay at my house. I live in the San Fernando Valley in Burbank. This means that I could stay in my house. They're shooting right over, like, you know, 5 miles away off of Roscoe or whatever, you know, in the valley. And I could be home with my wife every night. And the pay is exactly the same as I'm getting on these feature films. Now, the only drawback really of feature films, 2 drawbacks. One, usually they're not shot in Los Angeles anymore. Right. Yeah. So you have to go away. And that sucks if you have a family, especially if you have kids in school or whatever. The second drawback of a feature film is they never start on time. Ever. They're like, okay, January 1st, 7 a.m., we start shooting. And then December 25th, they call and say, actor availability problem. We're pushing to February. Yeah. Well, what the hell am I going to do for a month? You know, I got a house payment, right? Television, on the other hand, say we're starting January 1st. You better be there January 1st because they're rolling. You know, they have to put it on. Movie, They can get a different slot for it, you know, later or whatever. It's no big deal. So I have shot mostly over the past, 12, 15 years, mostly television. And now that streaming has become the thing, and since the pandemic and everything, the lines have blurred a lot. You know, it's like, you look at some of the series that are out there, so-called series, and you look at feature films and you go, well, shit, you know, they're the same almost, you know? I mean, clearly some of them have a lot lesser budgets, but the fact of the matter is, it's constant work. It pays good. And also in series, after the first season, usually the cinematographer gets to direct a couple. Right.
Oh,
and that happened on Awkward. I think I got the DGA, and, you know, this residual. What is this residual you speak of? You know, I've never heard of such. I get paid after the job's over. Well, I thought I just was paid for the day I worked. Yeah. So So that is a big plus, because on a feature, you're probably not going to start directing any of it unless the director falls off a cliff or something. So we hope that doesn't happen. I really have enjoyed myself, especially in these past few years. And that kind of brings us up to a couple of years back. I was contacted by my friends at Apple TV. And they said, we have this new series. At the time, they were calling it Astro. Now, Apple is like very, very private with their stuff, right? It's like anything that they have is as secret as the next iPhone. And right. They don't like to talk about it. There's no advanced PR. It's just like, oh, it's here. Here it is. So it was originally called
bought John
Astro.
Stewart.
Yeah, it was originally called Astro, and now it's called Puppy Place. All right. And as it sounds, it's a kid show with dogs. Now, what I didn't want this to look like was a proscenium type of a kid's television show. I didn't want it to feel like Dog with a Blog. No offense to Dog with a Blog. That dog is a smart ass dog. All right. So, but I didn't want it to feel like it was just big, puffy, flat light going across the stage and people could run around and, So my goal was to shoot it single camera, and it's an all African-American family. And my goal was to shoot them in a cinematic style, not in a style of how certain sitcoms on the networks over the past few years have treated people of color, i.e. blow them out. Right. I think that's ridiculous and looks like crap.
Uneducated lighting setups.
Yeah, it's like how fast do you need to get home, really? Let's try and make it look like something. So I had owned my own cameras, my HD cameras for some time, and I initially the first ones I bought were the Sony F55s. Those were nice cameras. They're a little dated now. You wouldn't want to run a F55 against a Venice, their newer camera, or the Venice 2. There's no competition. But at the time, compared to the other cameras that were existent, they were pretty damn good. So I'd owned them, and I was ready to buy some new stuff. And I was literally at a precipice where I was like, okay, I'm either going to buy a Venice camera or two, or I'm going to have to buy an Arri LF. Because, an Arri Mini doesn't work because it's not exactly 4K. Right? It's 3.8K, okay?
Thanks, Netflix.
Yeah, that's those couple of pixels people are going to notice on their crappy 720 TVs, right? Yeah, sure they are. Yeah, so that's another story entirely. Personally, I have historically loved the look of the Alexa camera. It's a gorgeous look, and the highlights roll off in just an incredibly cinematic way. My hero Roger Deakins used them, so that means they're great. And I dare you to challenge that. But they were unfortunately not 4K cameras. And I saw a blurb for Blackmagic. Now, my experience with Blackmagic to that point had only been in the Blackmagic 4K pocket camera, the Micro Four Thirds camera.
Right.
And I'd done some really cool stuff with that. Remember, I have a lot of lenses, and that includes a lot of 16 millimeter lenses.
Oh, oh man, that really, because that unlocks a lot for those cameras, having just a whack of lenses.
It's everything. It really is everything, because the cameras are very good. Those 4K cameras are very good, and they create a really pictorial sort of image. So if you team them with a vintage lens that doesn't have too much fungus or whatever in it that will still focus, then you can get some very, very interesting images. And I did, and I love that camera. And I saw the blurb for the 12K, the Mini 12K Pro. And
the Ursa?
Like, yeah, I'm like, 12K? Who the hell needs 12K? But, does it, will it sample at 4K? So
right.
The answer is yes. And another unique factor of it was that it was a new sensor that was not a Bayard sensor. So the pixels weren't in layers. The pixels are laid out end to end. So there's like red, green, and then a clear, I think, or something, or red, green, blue, and a clear. And so you've got 12K worth of pixels, but then it just shuts some off for 8K and shuts more off for 4K. And so I contacted John over at Blackmagic, and I'm like, look, I've got this Apple show coming up. I'm interested in the cameras, but I don't want to just blind buy the cameras. And, basically any camera or lens manufacturer will have loaners that, you give them a certificate of insurance so that you're not going to run to Mexico with it or whatever. And even though running to Mexico sounds fun, but not to steal a camera. So he loaned me one, and I shot some tests, and I was really impressed. It's a Super 35 size sensor, right? It's not a giant sensor, which meant that all of the 35 millimeter lenses that I have, and I have a lot, work with it. Anything that's PL mounted, I changed them out to a PL mount. Right. So even my full frame lenses still work with the Super 35 sensor. They're not just full frame lenses. As a matter of fact, you're using the sweet spot in the middle of the lens. You're not playing with the harrowing outside edges, which if you're shooting wide open could get fuzzy and weird,
Yeah.
So I have some vintage Cooks that were rehoused by TLS in London. Great company. They're a fantastic company, and the job that they did on my Cooks is amazing. So I had the Cooks, I had a bunch of zooms, and I've since kind of peppered in a bunch of modern stuff. Like I've worked in, if you Google me, you'll see some videos and things that I've done with the Korean company Zine.
I was going to ask about that.
Yeah, they have their full set of full frame lenses. And I discovered those, oddly enough, I have in the past and hope to very shortly again, since my show just ended, worked with the director, Joseph Kahn. Joseph Kahn is a super brilliant guy, man. He is a great artist, and he is the most studied creative guy in the commercial world that I've ever come across. And he takes, any movie, he'll take the movies that he truly likes and he'll reverse storyboard the movie. So he understands the process. That's super. I was like,
wow.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So
I was like, reverse storyboard. What
And since there were already storyboards before, he'll go back and recreate storyboards for whatever film it is and study them so he can figure out how the scenes are constructed individually. And it's a pretty brilliant guy. He told me, he goes, there's this new company that has these lenses and they're really fast and they're full frame. Check it out. They're Zine. So I got in touch with them, and I got a set, and then I did some promo work for them. And when they came out with their new lenses, the carbon fiber lenses, and now they're just about to release another new set of lenses, some anamorphic stuff too. So they're on fire. I bought a couple of these little short zooms by the company DZO.
Yep.
And
I knew that they were going to have to be garbage because they were only like $5,000 for two zooms, right? A wide zoom and a longer zoom, and AB camera.
There you
16
to 55, and then like the 50 to 250 or something like that.
50 to 125, and
125.
Yeah, and so which is plenty for a television set. If you need to go 250, I'll throw one of my old Cooks on. I've got the big old hogs, the slush pumps.
Yeah.
Damn, they're good. They're surprisingly good. Are they a $50,000 lens? Well, no, they're not a $50,000 lens. They don't feel like a $50,000 lens. Maybe they don't look like a $50,000 lens, but I tell you what, coupled with a brilliant camera like the Blackmagic, they look great. And they really speed things up. Before COVID, I was shooting just with primes. Once COVID hit, I didn't want the assistants going in and out of the set so much, especially initially it was a big deal, right? Like, initially, it was like vacuum lock. The actors were in a safe room, right? And, you had to run a key card and pass. And, I'm in. Okay, great. Close it.
You put the pest control tent over it.
So I bought those little DZOs, and they ended up being some of my favorite lenses of all time, simply because they really speed you up. I can do setups super fast. One camera I keep full time on a Ronin 2. The Ronin 2 sits on a dolly. Okay, so I've got one dolly that has a Ronin on it. Operators outside the set with my master wheels operating that camera. Second camera, generally a camera, I have on a dolly in the room. And because someone needs to speak to the actors. If they're missing their mark or whatever, or if we need to change an eye line, rather than screaming into the set, the A operator is there to say, hey, can you actually step on that mark instead of, on my foot? Can we work that out?
They're kicking the wheel on the dolly.
Exactly. So
so that's my current setup. And, ultimately though, I would love to just have Ronins or whatever iteration comes up next. I mean, I don't know if you've seen their chicken rig yet or whatever. The
Z4 or whatever it's called.
Exactly.
4D.
They brought me a prototype of that. I work with a director named Joe Lynch often, a wonderful guy. And we went to Serbia, and he called me once. He goes, I've got a movie. We're going to Serbia. It's really low budget. I want you to do it handheld. I was like, ugh, again, Bully, Super, all these handheld movies. Right. I'm sick of them.
My back hurts.
Yeah, so it does. So I go, well, what about the Movi thing? I hadn't even really researched those yet. And he goes, yeah, that sounds great. And I started researching, and they were like kind of expensive. And I saw this thing for Ronin, and it was a Ronin 1, right? This is designed for a DSLR.
Yeah.
And there were these cats that made extension arms for them, so you could theoretically use them with a movie camera. Note, F55 with anamorphic lens. Maybe a little too much for that rig.
Maybe a little heavy, yeah.
I was in Serbia. I had 2 of them, and we shot the whole damn movie on the Ronins. The first movie ever shot entirely on Ronins. When I got there, the Serbian camera crew who I'd already done one movie with over there. They come to me and I go, and here's how we're gonna do it, the Ronins, and they're like, and they start speaking in Serb, and then they look at me, and the one guy goes, it is not possible. I go, you got to change your attitude, bro. We got to make this happen, man. So we did it. So ultimately, I'd love to have 2 remote cameras, right? So there's not so many people sucking up air on the set. I feel like it's good, especially for the actors, because, anytime there's someone that's like really laser focused on you for whatever reason, it's a bad thing. Assistants don't do it anymore. They're no longer in there pulling tapes and setting the marks and all. They're back watching a monitor with little red dots on it, keeping you in focus, right? That's how it is now. So there doesn't need to really be anybody in there except for maybe a dolly grip, and if you can knock a sandwich out of his hand, then you can get the move done. I'm teasing.
Yeah.
Love my dolly grips. Love every single one of them. Sorry, guys. So ultimately, it's come down to this. Right now, I'm shooting with the Blackmagic 12K cameras. I absolutely love them. I've shot 2 series for Apple on them. I can't mention the new one because it's still in the cloak of secrecy. But sure. Puppy Place, 8 episodes are on Apple TV Plus, and there'll be another. We've shot 16 episodes. They'll release another 8, I think, in September or something. It's a really pretty show. I'm very proud of it because I captured a beautiful lifestyle of a fantastically talented and witty African-American family in a cinematic way for a TV show, not in an overlit, bogus sort of lighting decision, but in lighting that has meaning to it. Why is there a light there? Because there's a lamp over there. Why is there a lamp there? There's a window there. That's why. Sometimes there's a secret light that just has to be there for whatever reason, especially with the dogs, because the dogs have these jet black eyes, and I'm like, oh my god, I can't see the dog.
The Obi light comes back into play.
Well, if you ever hear anybody that comes out and like, well, where's that light supposed to be coming from? Where's the music coming from?
Yep. Yeah.
Right. There's music on this show. Where's that coming from? Right. I don't see a stereo. So I intend, whatever my next project is, to shoot also on this. Now, we've shot a lot at 8K. Anytime there are visual effects, we shoot 8K, and they love it. The visual effects guys absolutely love it. Got a bunch of frame to move around. Also, if we're really super, super low on time, it's just not possible to get wide, medium, and close all in 2 camera setups. I'll shoot a wide and a close, and then shoots close in 8K so that it can punch into an ECU and still look great. And I don't think that I've shot anything in 12K. We tested it, and the gigs were flying. It's just like, wow, we need some big drives to do that. But
that super sampled 4K looks great, because I think isn't that kind of why they built that camera? It wasn't necessarily for 12K, it was for like the full cut down 4K. Yeah,
well, I'm telling you, to my eye, it definitely has the qualities and the beauty of the Alexa sensor. I hope I don't get in trouble for saying that, but it does.
No one pays for
but
this.
but it's, but I mean, the camera's, what is it, $7,000 or something? It's yeah. And the only Alexa you're going to buy for 7,000 is one without a sensor.
You can pick up a classic on eBay I was looking at them recently for like 6 to 8, but then you're dealing with those S/S cards. It's the old bun. It's built like a tank, but also weighs a tank.
And you're not going on Netflix.
No, yeah. Personal project, send it, go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, like I said, they're beautiful cameras. I love them, and that's why I initially was so attracted to this camera, because the look. It wasn't necessarily because of the price itself. I had already spec'd out and was prepared to buy other more expensive cameras, but I canceled that sale, and I couldn't be more happy. I have 3 of these Blackmagic cameras now, by the way. So
it's I've spoken a lot about how it's got, because I write camera reviews for ProVideoCoalition.com.
Cool.
And other shit. But in this sense, it's gotten hard to review cameras because they're all quote unquote perfect. They're all
really good.
It's really good. Ergonomics now. It's like, do you need body features or stuff? Because like the images are just so clean. And then once you get in the grade, half of your foot as a DP is in the grade. So as long as you have a nice data set, as Steve Yedlin says. I got to stop saying
hey, it's the famous DP Peter Anderson calling me. Sorry, Peter, if you watch this podcast, you'll see that I dodged your call.
We'll clip it for you. You can just send him it.
Great. I do want to talk about the good and the bad of the camera, though. I think it's fair. Do you know what I'm saying? I'm giving a review because I've worked with them now for a couple of years.
Yeah, I have not yet touched one. So this is actually, I've done the Pocket 6K, the Pocket 4K, had a few gripes about the shape, but overall the image is outstanding. Yeah, especially at that price point.
That is a different sensor, though. That's a Bayard sensor, and even the Pocket 6K Pro is also the Bayard sensor. But the only drawback is I got spoiled. Okay, in between the first Apple show and the last Apple show that I did, I was called by the same person that called me to do Awkward. She had a show called On My Block, and she had actually called me to shoot that series initially in the very beginning. And if that had happened, things wouldn't have ended up the same way they are. It's funny how things go. You think, oh, I really want that. But then when you don't get that, you're like, but then other things happen that are great, So, and then she called me just in the right time. I just stopped that show. And so I shot the last 4 episodes of that series, and they were shooting on the Venice camera. And the Venice camera, it's a beautiful camera. It's a monster. Okay. Yeah. It's a hog. When you put that onto a Ronin, you're like, oh yeah, you're doing something there, right?
I had also heard that the Rialto sounds like a good idea until you try to rig it up, and then it's like, oh.
Yeah, I don't need all that. But so what spoiled me, the only thing that spoiled me, and I've spoken to Blackmagic people, the thing that really got me was the dual ISO.
Oh, sure.
Because that 2500 ISO, it looks really, really good. And you can light with windows, basically. Yeah. You stick a light mat up to give a little top light and push light into a window and then a bounce card, and you're lit. So, and apparently the Venice 2 is 3500 ISO, I think, right? Or is it 3000?
The Venice 1 is 825.
802. Yeah, 25. Yeah. I think the new one is either 3 or 35. Good Lord. Fantastic. I'll take all you got. Give me all them ISOs. That spoiled me a little bit because, I am lighting exclusively with LEDs right now. And I don't use any hard lights. The only hot lights I use are Airy Maxes for day exteriors, and right. And if I'm on a location and I need sunlight consistent throughout the day, I'll hit it with Airy Maxes. But otherwise, it's like vortexes and airy lights and that such. And
I just picked up the Kino Diva, the 20s.
That's beautiful. Yeah.
Oh my God. I think those are up near the top of the charts, better than the Sky panels. They meter way better than the Sky panel. Like TLC, do. I was getting TLC eyes of 100.
Yeah, I use the 31s a lot, and they're just gorgeous lights. Frieder did a great job with that. He's an old friend of mine, that Frieder. He made a lot of money on fluorescent tubes, and good for him. We needed it. When when he came along, they literally would take fluorescent lights apart, take the ballast, and just wire it to the pins, and that's how they would run around with loose fluorescent stuff.
Yeah,
And
they
he
just
saw a better
attached it to show cards, right? They just taped
exactly.
it, and they're like,
then he
here you
figured
go.
out the Coroplast stuff, and he was off to the races. And he's a brilliant man, and his LED lights are gorgeous. There are a lot of them out there now. Frankly, the S60s now seem not so good, not so strong. They're fabulous. The idea is great, and their ability to emulate police lights or lightning strikes or TV or whatever you want.
Kinos do that too now, though.
They all do now
with the new 5.0 firmware that they just recently released.
They honestly all do. Light Panels has recently dropped a prototype of their light, which looks remarkably like either of those.
Yeah,
it's on my floor back there. I can't show you guys right now, but it's really, really bright. Really bright. I was like, holy Moses. And I look, and the LED array, whereas if you look at like a Vortex or something, you see a jillion small pixels. There's like a bunch of larger pixels, and they're smoking bright light. So
what's
it's just going to keep
temperature
going.
On that?
Variable, anything you want. It's completely.
No, sorry, not Kelvin. Like heat.
The IRA?
Like, does it get real hot?
There's a bit of heat that comes off of it. I mean, you can still touch it with your hand. It's not like a Mole 407 where you're going to leave your fingerprints on the light. Yeah. But it has a heat sink on the back and a fan like most of them do. And it's a prototype. They're just like, here, take this, run it for 1,000 hours, shoot some stuff with it, and give us feedback. So
that's awesome.
I love doing that. You review stuff, I review stuff. I don't do it online or professionally or anything. I just give them some feedback and say, this is great.
That's the goal. I would much rather have input on a product than tell other people about the product. Cause I love making things for me. Like I have a 3D printer. I'm always like, if something isn't rigged correctly, I'm like, I'm going to make a version that is correct for me, like storage, anything. I'm always like tweaking or building on top of existing stuff to make it mine. So to give it to the product manufacturer themselves and be like, this is what would make it better for me, and then to have that product given to you is like the dream.
I think early on I was inspired by Eddie Van Halen, who made his own Strat, right, and sawed his Ibanez Destroyer up and made it a Shark, and all these. I was like, I had no idea you could do that with a guitar. I looked at my Les Paul. I'm like, where's my saw? But but the same thing goes for all this stuff and what you're saying. It's great. First of all, it's great to experiment.
Yeah.
What I loved back in the day, nothing more, was experimenting on film, because film is so variable, and whereas with HD, when it's under, you just see it, you know what I mean? And that's what it is. And really there's not much you can do. And when it's way over, there's not so much you can do. But with film, there might be something still there on either end of that extreme, And so that was a lot of fun to experiment with, to ruin film. I mean, they used to do that thing called bleach bypass, where you would come out of developing tank and go right into a fixing tank and miss the bleach. And so all the silver stayed on the negative. And that's how you got, it looks like Traffic. You remember that movie, and get those where the color is skewed, and
Saving Private Ryan famously.
Right. And very, very expensive process too. They figured, hey, okay, we're not going to use the bleach. So that means we can save about $100,000 in chemicals a week, and we'll charge more. Yeah. Excellent. Perfect. We like this. Yeah. So,
one thing.
What else?
I wanted to ask, because I had heard that you, at one point at least, were watching Blade Runner like 5 times a week.
The new one or the old one?
The old one, but I'm sure the new one as well.
Yeah. It's Roger again.
Yeah, just
Roger.
top of the Roger. Notice me.
We'll drive by his house. Roger.
Apparently, I live not near him, but in the same sort of general LA area. But I wanted to ask, because something that I've noticed with certain filmmakers or people who create things, that the fans of that product tend to know more about the product than the person who made it, because Star Wars fans know way more about Star Wars than George Lucas.
Right.
So I kind of wanted to know, like, what did you learn about absorbing that much Blade Runner? Like, what are things that that taught you, or that you could pick apart, or things that maybe you carried on into your own filmmaking career?
You know, first of all, Jordan was incredible. All right.
Yeah.
And if you haven't seen that film, I have, but if you haven't seen it, watch it and absorb it. And it is his, I guess what I learned from him was how to be bold and how to be fearless. Because if you look at his cinematography, especially on that movie, he is fearless. Everything that he did was cutting edge. Even from, like, you know, the gorgeous shots in, I think it's not Terrell's building, but it's in the original Blade Runner building where he's interviewing that guy that ultimately freaks out and kills the guy. The light that's coming through
the interrogation room.
And remember, you know, I'm very guilty of this, by the way. I tend, when I'm watching movies and really watching the cinematography, I turn the volume off.
Sure. Yeah.
And my wife does not like that part of it at all. Okay. She just doesn't get that. You know, I'm like, look, I don't want to be distracted by that. I want to just look at the images. But if you look at that film frame to frame to frame, it's a masterpiece. And he is so fearless in what he's doing. I don't know if he was aware at that time that he was ill. Maybe he was or not, but I think he kind of found out on Alien 3. Right. Well, it looks like the work of a man who does not care what happens. He wants to just go for it. And it is. And it affects me that way. I can watch it. And when I watch it, I'm pumped up. I'm like, yeah, man, I can do some great stuff like that too. You know, I'm just one light. Yeah. That's all we're using today, boys. One light, you know, and then cut to 10 minutes later. And I'm like, okay, give me a little fill over there. And another one. But, you know, that's a wholly different thing. I am a gigantic fan of anamorphic. Okay. That is, sure. I've shot 3 or 4 films myself in anamorphic and a billion music videos in anamorphic and commercials. And if I could only shoot in anamorphic, I would. There's nothing wrong with spherical. I think it's beautiful. I don't understand why the ASC and the Directors Guild and everybody else, the Producers Guild, let Congress decide that we needed a 16:9 frame to be the catch-all frame for everything, you know? Right. It's like that didn't fit anything that was being made at the time. TV was 4:3. Feature films, most of them were 1.85, right? Where's the 16:9? Where's the 1.78 in any of that? There's not, right? So it's cool. And at least it's a rectangle. It's not a square, or, you know, even earlier films were more of a postage stamp type of thing. It's not that, but the anamorphic frame really separates, and to me, when you see it, says this is cinema. This is cinema. And if you're forced to compose, I don't know why you would be forced to, but if you're composing in an anamorphic frame, it's endless. The combination of ways you can stack the foreground, the background, and everything else that's going on in action, because it's such a nice wide frame. The trick is, of course, is finding a set of lenses and enough lighting to shoot with that, so that you don't have to shoot the darn things wide open. Because most of them, there are a few exceptions, but most of them fall apart horrifically if you shoot them open from, say, T4. You know, they're like, I told you I had that vintage set of Cooke spherical prime lenses that are from the 40s and 50s. And the 18mm is a gorgeous lens, but if you shoot it at 2.8, it looks like you rub Vaseline around the outside. And I ask about it, and people go, "Oh, well, that's the Cooke look." I'm like,
I don't think so.
No, it looks like someone put a donut on the outside of my lens. So you just can't shoot that lens at a 2.8. You know, you need to shoot it at 4. Same with anamorphic. They soften up a great deal. It's just the mechanics of the glass itself. So I'm sorry, I'm trying to segue this back to Jordan, but you know, the way that he utilized flares, the way that he utilized those lenses, his composition skills, everything about that film is fearless. And, you know, it is a favorite of mine, but I don't know that it's necessarily my most favorite film of all time. As far as cinematography goes, and this is going to be a bit of a mind blower, one of the top 5, let's say there's top 5. One of the top 5 is Miller's Crossing. Okay.
Sure. Oh,
and
yeah.
now this is Barry Sonnenfeld. Okay. Now, Barry Sonnenfeld,
I have his book.
excellent. What do you got?
Call Your
I
Mother.
can't see it. Oh, yeah.
Oh, it's way over there. But yeah, Call Your Mother.
Nice. Barry Sonnenfeld, great cinematographer. If, obviously, Misery, stunning piece of work, right? When Harry Met Sally, even though it's a rom-com, it's still really beautiful. Blood Simple. I mean, his work speaks for itself. His car commercials that he's directed and shot since then, also just stunning stuff. And of course, he directed a bunch of big blockbuster movies himself.
Men in Black is in my top 3.
Yeah, I mean, why not? But his work on Miller's Crossing is really, really, really good. And I got to talk with him when I was at Paramount. He was doing Addams Family Values.
Sure.
And I saw a roll come through and it said Barry Sonnenfeld. I'm like, wait a minute, what is this? And there were baby pictures. And I'm like, all right, give me 5 8x10s and 5 5x7s of this immediately. And I sent him and his assistant comes in. She's like, a New York PA type.
To be fair, not for you to keep.
Right. Just have a look at him. She comes back and she goes, Barry wants to know why you did that. I go, well, because I think he's a great cinematographer and I'm a big fan. And she goes, all right, I'll tell him. She's like Eeyore, right? And
right.
So they several times he would send stuff in, especially once he figured out he could get some freebies. He sent more stuff in. And I at the end of Addams Family, she came back in. She goes, all right, Barry wants to meet you. And I'm like, really? And she goes, yeah, he's over at the trailer. So I hopped on my little Paramount camera bike, and I ride over there and I'm sitting and he's classic, man. He's smoking a stogie with his feet kicked up on the porch of his trailer, right? Smoking. And he goes, so I hear you want to be a DP. And I'm like, yes, sir. And he goes, I got some advice for you. Takes a long drag. And I'm like, leaning over the handlebars. He goes, just overexpose and you'll be fine. And I'm like, I run a film lab. All right. And we sat there and we talked for, I don't know, an hour and a half or 2 hours. And we went in deep about Miller's Crossing. And it's great stuff. It's long Lindsay, beautiful stuff. Other movies, obviously, Deacon's catalog of work is just incredible. And I'm not sure that I necessarily have a favorite, even though some of the things, I was initially drawn to the beauty of things like Barton Fink and Hudsucker, or Shawshank. Those films really drew me in because of the beautiful type of cinematography. But then he went and he did Dead Man Walking, and it kind of spun my head, and I'm like, well, this is me talking. Well, that looks like shit, that doesn't look, and it took a friend of mine to talk me down off of the ledge. They're like, well, look, it suits the subject. And I'm
right.
Like, oh, okay, let me get down off the ledge.
Yeah.
I'm going to jump. So, and then his later work, No Country is fantastic. I mean, let's face it. I love the guy. I love what he's done. Skyfall is, brilliant, right?
The best looking James Bond period. I mean,
it's
easily.
it's brilliant, man. The scenes with that mansion at the end and all, and it's, oh my God.
The fog outdoors and all that.
Yeah. Just ridiculous, and look, only Roger, after being nominated 8 or 10 times for Academy Awards, would win for a Day Exterior movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. I mean, and I'm an Academy member, and I had seen him at Academy Award shows several times, and we'd always be in the line at the bar right before the show, and I'd be like, Roger, I wish you the best. You're going to win this year, and he wouldn't win. Finally, I'm like, I'm not going to say that to him anymore.
Yeah.
I don't think he wanted me to either. And he was nominated for some incredible movies. One year, he was nominated for 2 movies, at the same time. So, wow.
What is it about his work that because it is another version of Fearlessness where it's so understated. I remember hearing him kind of joke about how people were mad at him for not lighting Shawshank, and he's like, what are you, out of your mind? There's tons of light in that film.
Yeah.
That's
here's what I think.
Yeah, go ahead.
Here's what I think his secret is. First of all, it's his operating is impeccable, and he doesn't operate for the sake of operating. again, like Dead Man Walking was, lit to serve the story. His operating serves the story, and his dolly moves or his boom moves. And if you go back and look at them now, you'll see they're very, very controlled and generally very smooth and just make a point. He's telling the story too, and that's what a great cinematographer can do, is take the director's idea that's been in their head for rattling around for a year, take that idea and try and get it onto the screen, and at the same time accentuate. Now you can accentuate through the lighting, or you can accentuate through the camera, and or both. And Roger is great at operating his lighting, and I bugged him about this a lot. And finally he was like, what? I kept showing up like he'd be speaking places, right? And I'd be in the front row every time, and he'd come out and be
he catches your eye and just goes, fuck.
Yeah, what is this guy? Why is he here? I'm like, so finally one day, I'm not kidding, we were at Digital Domain, and there was some sort of DP symposium. Alan Davio was there, who was another wonderful, wonderful man. And Roger was there, and he goes, okay, what do you want? And I'm like, I just want to learn how to light like you. I love the quality of light that you have. I go, and he goes, well, name a scene. And, I drew a blank like a moron, right? And I'm like, like in Hudsucker, in Hudsucker, in the boardroom, where all those guys are at that long board table, and there's obviously a trans light at the end, but there's walls behind them. How did you light all those people even? And for a moment, I thought that my hero was a mystic, right? Because he goes, watch it again and you will see the light. And I'm like, this is fantastic, man. He's giving me like some sort of, some karma thing, right? So I go back, and in the table, you can see the light reflected in the table, right? Like, oh, all right, I get it. But he also told me at that time about his use of shower curtain or half soft frost, which is a diffusion that cinematographers in the grips use to soften lights. And he would do multi layers. Oh, good. I'm getting a free solar call on my old landline that's over there. And press 1 to speak with the energy specialist. Yeah. So, depending upon how many layers of diffusion you use, the light softens. It also reduces the amount of light, but it softens it sometimes dramatically. Half soft.
If anyone's watching, you can see the difference between 251 at the beginning of this conversation and a bare Kino now.
Yeah, it's not bad, but you could use a little powder. So makeup. So this is a big thing, and this is a thing that I did. And for a while, my stuff really kind of had that vibe, of like a book light, or a book light is where you bounce light and then it comes off of the bounce back through diffusion, or you can do just a multi-layered diffusion with a light going through. Now that we have the LEDs, they tend to be a lot more diffuse than our older Fresnel type lights that we're all familiar with, the hot ones. So it generally can only take maybe just one layer of diffusion to get the desired effect that you want. But he was using that half soft frost, and for a long time that's all I would use. But I would use like, however many layers. I'm like 5 layers. The grips are like, you're out of your mind. What are you doing? Right. And then I had
just push it through a bed sheet at this point.
I had a friend of mine who did some job Steadicam for Roger. And I was kind of laughing at myself. I was like, oh yeah, I used to do like layer after layer of this diffusion. He goes, no. He goes, there were like these 40 by layers of shower curtain. He goes, I got lost in the middle of them. I didn't know where the fuck I was. I was like, is there 2 that way and 3 that way? And he goes, so, diffusion is cool. By the way, it's something that used to be really popular, and I never really did this, but I would have loved to try it. To take styrofoam, and you can use thin styrofoam. You can still do it, but we used to work a lot with these Maxi Brute lights, which like a stadium light. It has like 3 or 9 car headlight looking units in it, and then shine that through that styrofoam, and the light is all broken up in the way that it's traveling through, and it creates a really gorgeous, lovely, very smelly as it melts.
And for people listening, you're not talking about packaging foam. You're talking about the sort of craft foam.
Yes,
white,
exactly.
Translucent craft foam.
That's right. Like what's on, a foam core, so without the paper edging on it. It was literally just like some sort of styrofoam stuff. We did that for a long time. That was interesting, but like I said, not so great. And then there's the cloth things. There's Muzz, which is a beautiful fabric that comes in either bleached or unbleached. The unbleached is a lot warmer, obviously.
Right.
But that really soaks up some light. You need some powerful lights to get through that. Unless you're shooting at a high ISO, you can probably get away with it. But that diffusion was wonderful. And now after a long period of time, I'm finding myself again bouncing lights, right? And doing the book light type of thing. So you bounce into a piece of foam core, and even with the LEDs, you bounce into the foam core, and then that bounce light comes back through a sheet of diffusion. You can't beat it. The wrap that it creates on a face. And let's face it, that's really what it's coming down to, is the face, right? I mean, you can light a building. Like if you look at, if for whatever reason you ever looked at my Punisher Warzone movie, you would see that I did a lot.
I watched a bunch of clips before this.
I did a lot of building lighting in colors, yellows and purples, and
very Blade Runner-y for some of those fight scenes in the
little bit of that, and homage. And I also, by the way, obviously I didn't invent all that, but I noticed that a lot of television stuff really looked like that the next year or two after that. There was a lot of colors that matched exactly. I was like, oh, okay, that's how that works. I guess that's how Jordan felt. So you can light some people, I used to hear DP say, I light the room, and then the people walk around and throughout it, right? And that's all fine and good, I think, for like a drama or something. But if you're doing something where the people have to look great, you have to light the faces too, Right. And Alan Davio gave me the greatest tip. I hope I'm not rambling too much here, but
Alan, you're doing great.
Alan Davio gave me just the most amazing tip at that same place at Digital Domain, where I was bothering Deacons. He ran out of there, ultimately, horrified by my presence, and Davio took over. And Alan said, look, get the biggest light you can get it as far away from the set as you can, and put your diffusion as close to the actor as you can. And that will be your softest light source. And what that does, and I actually played with that a lot in a little movie that Ryan Felipe actually directed, where he was supposed to be kidnapped in this cabin in the woods, and all 4 of the walls were wild. The cabin was in the woods.
Oh, excellent.
And all 4 walls were wild. So whenever I was not looking at this wall, the wall was out, and the entire wall was a diffusion sheet. And so they could move around inside the cabin. And because the light is so diffuse and the light is so far away, if they moved, 6 or 8 feet in either direction, they didn't change in luminance. But if you have a source that's fairly close to them, they're really bright when they're near it, and they're darker when they're further away from it, So that really worked great. And Alan was a brilliant man. He actually made me not want to be a DP at a certain point. I started shooting these thesis films for USC, and there's no nepotism in my family. No one in my family was ever making movies or doing anything, other than drinking heavily. Yeah. And so the family gift, the family curse. Yeah. So I shot some of these USC thesis films, and I'm losing my track of thought now. Davio. So I'm way out in Central California shooting in this ancient house that had these wooden walls, dark wood walls. And we love that. There was dark furniture in there. And of course, very white people walking around in there. And so the room looked kind of egregious because they were lit, but the room was black. And I had a card. Davio goes, here's my card. And if you ever have something that you can't figure out, give me a call. And I looked, it's like 10:30. I'm like, I got to do it, right? Because I don't want to blow this scene. So I call him up. He answered. He remembered me, he said. And he goes, all right, explain it. And I go, well, dark walls, dark furniture, white people. He goes, all right. He goes, you got any Kino flows? I go, yes, sir. He goes, all right, take them behind the furniture and glow the wall ever so slightly. And he goes, that'll give you separation from the furniture. And then when your people come in and sit, you'll be able to see that there is a sofa behind them and not just blackness. And I was like, okay, that's so simple. It makes so much sense. Am I really supposed to be doing this job? I mean, I feel like a moron, but everyone learns every single day they go on set, and I really hadn't shot very much at that point at all. I'd never even considered putting a light behind a piece of furniture before. That didn't even occur to me. I just thought I would light the person,
And now we have Titan tubes.
Yeah. And boy, are they flexible. And the Astera stuff is just, really phenomenal. And its ability to do anything, I mean, it's so cool. Initially, I was using them before the LED wall thing really kind of took over. I was using those for my active light and when I was doing process trailer work.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Do a chase on them, and you got the street light effect as you're driving.
You know what's funny is when those AX1 tubes first came out, I went over to Stray Angel, which is a local rental house right by me, and we were they had just taken ownership of one of those, and we were like, how do we show what these do? And so we drove a Fiat 500 into the studio and set up a process thing just to demonstrate.
Yeah.
And did a review in the car with the lights going and all that.
It looks a lot better than a guy on a ladder with a light going like that. It's like stupid. I'm like, that doesn't look real at all. So yeah, that was horrible. Process trailers, fortunately, are almost history at this point, thank God. Because no one likes breathing diesel all day long. No one likes sitting on the generator back up on the roof thing and your butt's burning and the director's screaming into the walkie and the actors can't tell what she or he is saying. And you have to stop for makeup and then the actors get hot and then they run the AC in the car, or they're cold and they run the heater in the car. But the volume walls really have been a game changer. The LED walls, I mean, that's really the way to do it. That if you could afford it, it's the only way to do it because it looks the most real. You don't have a trailer going as you're driving along. And, you can't just clamp a camera onto a Hostess tray and drive it off into the night and get what you want. You're not going to get what you want. So in that movie Bully, again, to the learning, I love talking about my mistakes because now they're fairly funny. I don't cry very often.
Right.
In Bully, when the two boys are in the car and Marty Puccio, the bully punches Marty Puccio in the car. When he goes forward, there's a rail that's sticking up that I couldn't see when I was framing it up because the actor was sitting there. Right.
Oh no.
And as he leans forward to punch the guy, there's a piece of speed rail sticking up from, the process trailers have speed rails that go up for safety. They have rails that go around, and the key grip had left that particular one there, and it's forever in the movie. It's there still. I was like, are they ever going to do like a 4K version of Bully? Because I'll go in there and clean that up real quick, but no, not so much. So, but I'm really glad that we're not doing process trailer work anymore. That's
for sure. I quickly wanted to ask, kind of going back to the color and lighting, and now with LEDs and stuff, is with film, it felt like mixing color temperatures when chosen was generally kind of dramatic, and it feels like digital doesn't see that difference so much. Like you can get away with a lot more. And I was wondering how you approach creative mixing of color temperatures, and when maybe you would lean on either gels or something more like an RGB scenario to drag that separation out maybe.
At the moment, because I'm doing television, and we have the last show had kids, and so you got to go. You got 8 hours with the kid and they're pumpkin, right? And you're done, which is good in some regards because nobody really wants to work 14 hours a day every day. No one. And although my key grip occasionally says he would really like to get the hours, but overtime. Because I'm just doing the LEDs, I don't have that distinction of really being able to use gels on the hot lights anymore. And I'm not using any gels whatsoever as far as color on the sets. What I think makes it more effective is not having certain colors in your spectrum. In other words, the LEDs can do dramatic things, and they can get some pretty like oversaturated colors that are gross. And I don't know if you ever worked with any of the really early LEDs. They were all like blown out, burned out, ugly looking crap, right?
Yeah.
But to me, as far as lighting a set, it's what you don't put into the set that is the go juice. That's the good stuff. Is like, you want people subconsciously, I think, to want, they're looking at the scene. It's a cold blue wash, right? And they're just wanting for warmth. Their mind goes, this is cold. This is perilous. This is sad. This is not, and I wish it was a warm, sunny day, right? And on the other hand, when you're doing a day scene, and I've really played with this a lot lately. It's funny that you mentioned it, but the color temperature itself, I've found myself going a lot to 2800 Kelvin, which is quite a bit warmer than
on the light or on the camera? On the light.
On the light.
Yeah.
And just to get that extra saturation in that warm level, and the lights are so pure that you can do it, and it doesn't really stink the image up in a way that it would years ago if you were shooting with a red one. That you'd have, you'd have had an issue with that. But they make great stuff now.
Yeah,
and
notoriously daylight loving those old original reds.
320 ISO. Not really, but it said 320 on it, so hey, it must be 320. I was telling someone earlier today, I was when I was shooting Super, James was like, I want to do this all handheld. I'm like, ugh. And he's like, and I want you to operate it. I'm like, well, who's going to light it? Right. So to me, it's not one of my favorite looking films that I've ever worked on. That's for sure. But the camera was kind of abysmal. There was a day when I would walk in and they'd say, okay, do you want Panavision? Do you want Arri? Do you want Primo lenses, or do you want Zeiss or Cooks? And then one day I walked in and they go, okay, so you're shooting on the red. And I'm like, say what? You're shooting on the red camera. Okay. Can I choose my lenses, please? And they're like, yeah, you can still choose lenses.
You get the red primes.
That's it. So the new changing subject a little bit, but staying with that, the new emulsion is really lenses, because the cameras are so great that there's really a battle royale out there in lens land for all these top companies and smaller companies like some that I mentioned earlier, who are really trying to woo people away with some of their more exotic lenses. And I've just been given a set that I can't really talk about from a different lens manufacturer that they have experimented with coatings, and they've come up with a coating they feel is representative of a vintage lens, whatever that means.
Right.
But I did a little test the other night where I shot a expensive, beautiful prime lens, and this lens, which has its vintage thing. And then as a measure, I took my my vintage Cook, and compared them. And what I noticed was the fabulous expensive lens is clean, sharp, perfect. Boom. There it is. Yeah. Has a nice bokeh in the background, resists flares fairly well. The vintagey new lens had something. Not sure what it is, but it had a grit to it that gave it a little bit of an edge, made it feel more like more like Bullet or something. You know what I'm saying? Like,
sure.
Even though I happen to know that was shot on Cooks, but it gave it a grit. And then the Cook lenses were just softer. All right. They didn't necessarily have, which these are, by the way, these are Cook Series 2 and 3s, not their magnificent brand new lenses. That we're not talking about that at all. Right. These are their old lenses, and all they really were softer. That Cook look thing is a thing, and it is, when you're even with a portrait lens of 50 or longer, when you're at a 2.8 or more wide open, they get very soft, and that is very desirable, or especially was very desirable back in the 40s and 50s and earlier, when they were shooting beautiful ladies and they wanted to get that glamour look. And they'd take a piece of radial diffusion. I don't know if you've ever seen this. Joe Walker's
Not
collection.
a radial diffusion, no.
Yeah, Joe Walker's collection. Do I have any of them sitting up here on the counter? I use this place is just a tornado. I think I might have one here. See, it's covered in dust, of course. But what this is, this is it's called MPA. It's a Mitchell diffusion, and I know you're not going to be able to see it, but it has these concentric rings in the glass.
Like etched
The
in.
glass itself it's not etched, it's molded so that they actually raise up. And right in the center is clear. So if you use this to focus on a person and you put the clear spot right in here, all the rest softens up. And it softens up in a very unique way. It's not something that modern cinematographers or audiences, I think, are familiar with. It looks really, really good. But if they move, here, then their eye goes out of focus. It looks weird. But stay there. You'll notice those shots. If you now, when you're watching Turner Classic Movies or whatever, and you see these old black and white movies, when they cut to that close up of the girl, she's pretty much static, right? She's like,
right,
I love you, but she's staying right there.
She got that slash too. And you're just like, don't move out of there.
All of that stuff. And so, but back to the vintage coding thing, they might be onto something because everybody wants to look a little different, and it's really kind of hard with all these fantastic cameras. I mean, the Blackmagic camera is gorgeous. Obviously, the LF and the Venice cameras are stunning cameras. The new Red cameras are incredibly nice cameras. So,
this is a C500 Mark II.
But those are genius cameras too. Look how they're handling those highlights behind you back there.
Yeah, this is completely blown.
Yeah, it's gone.
But it's not in. I will say it's not in the log. This is a LUT I designed a couple days ago that I've been goofing off with, but
nice.
Which is why I look extra pink.
But you're under 100 in the log.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Here, will it show on? No,
that's too bad.
Yeah.
It should be a waveform on every zoom.
Right. I can't. It takes some menu finagling. I could show you the. Fuck it. Let's see.
You can do it.
I know I can do it. But yeah, I've really been enjoying this.
It's a great camera.
Yeah. And you know what? Weirdly enough, I shoot it, talking about ISO, I shoot it at 400 more often than not, because I'm not finding that I lose any detail in the highlights, but it's still, it just kills the noise. Because at 800, there's a little bit of shadow noise, but nothing too bad. So there's your LUTs off. And then I think we can go. Yeah. I actually have locked into here, I have the ARRI LUT. So you can see that's with just the stock ARRI LUT instantly
it looks
goes
like
green.
every car commercial from 8 years ago.
Yeah.
They just all were like, I'm like, how come they all look kind of blue-green?
This is the, I modeled the LF, so it should be nearly identical to the LF here.
Right.
A lot of different experimenting I've been doing in color, because during the pandemic, I didn't have any work, so I became a colorist.
I get it. I totally get it. I remodeled my house. We were like, we need to redo that bathroom. And, the pandemic hit, and I was like, I'll do it. And then 2 months later, I was like, why? What am I thinking? And that was, and I'm still working on some areas of the house, but it's kind of cool. And I still have all my fingers, which was the primary concern. I don't want to be like Django Reinhardt, and doing this or playing slide for the rest of my life. That would suck.
Yeah.
So
on the lenses thing, I actually wanted to ask, as of this recording, which will date it, yesterday, the Cine Lens manual came out from Jay Holden and Chris Probst. Have you been able to look at it?
I have not had a chance, but they contacted me several months ago and requested permission to go to the museum and dig through my lenses and take measurements and notes on a bunch of the vintage glass that was in there. And of course, I love that. Prost's a good guy. He's a lens aficionado, and certainly he was actually working for Con before I joined on to Con, and then he moved on to other pastures. And but he's a good guy, and he's very thorough,
and quite academic. So I'm certain that the book is, the bomb. I can't wait to get it. I don't even have the new handbook. I don't get
think
by
anyone
there.
does, do they?
It's there. I've been there and seen them sitting there. I've just resisted my impulse to have one. Yeah. But it's there, and
I've actually got. Oh, you can't see it. Can you see it over there? No, it's behind some shit. I have, what is it? 1, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10.
Amazing.
No, I'm missing 5, so I need 3 and 5 to complete the collection.
Amazing. Yeah, that's definitely a habit. I get bit by that bug. There are a lot of bugs in our, like you're a drummer, I'm a guitar player. There's a thing called GAS, right? Guitar acquisition syndrome. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the same thing goes for cinematography books. And I found the same thing goes if you can do it, lenses as well. It's just, I don't know why I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sets of lenses sitting behind me, right? Why? I'm not on a show right now. I mean, what?
Do you rent them out at all?
No. No. I mean, if you need some, let me know. I'll loan you some. But
I'd love that. Yeah.
Yeah, but I can't be bothered with trying to track people down and get their certificate of insurance and all that stuff. I don't have a storefront at the moment. That just doesn't make sense. But what does make sense is owning your cameras and then being able to rent them to the production. That's.
Oh yeah. No, that's and also how you can negotiate. You keep your rate, but you're like, whatever, I'll hack 50% off my camera or whatever it is, and they're like, that sounds good.
Yeah, and I've always done that. As a matter of fact, even when I was with Roger Corman, after I could no longer borrow Panavision rigs anymore, I think it's obvious what cameras I was using.
I think we figured it out.
Yeah, when I couldn't borrow those, I bought a couple of 2Cs, and I had them for doing, whatever. If we needed a third camera, we were blowing a car up, which we seem to do almost every week. We're going to blow a cop car up. Okay, great. Go to Griffith Park, put a foot of det cord and 5 gallons of gas and let her rip,
Yeah.
So I would, put the 2Cs around. And then once I started shooting music videos, in the beginning, there really weren't a lot of video taps anyway. Video taps looked like ass, okay,
right,
off of a film camera. I don't know how many times I would have a producer come up to me and go, it's not going to look like that, right? I'm like, no, this is a horrible
it's like 260 by 180.
If, and it's black and white, and it's probably slightly out of focus too. And so I would take the 2Cs and shoot the music videos, and the director would stand next to me and assume that I was getting what he thought I was getting, which is the way it used to be done.
Yeah.
And there's still great cameras. I have a couple of 2Cs laying around in here that are that I bought not that long ago. I think I bought them at the beginning of the pandemic. This studio where Bruce Lee shot Enter the Dragon. Return of the Dragon. Yeah, Enter the Dragon. They actually had the two Cs that they'd used on all those movies, and the studio is called Shaw Brothers Studios. Some representative had contacted me and said, "Are you at all interested in these?" And I was like, yeah, "I'll take them." And I don't know why I'm buying 2Cs, but what am I doing? I'm going backwards. I saw this 2C, and I found out that it belonged to the guy who had shot with this camera Jimi Hendrix at the Isle of Wight show, his very last show. Right?
Oh wow!
He shot Hendrix, and the Who was on that bill. And he also had shot Bob Dylan at the folk festival when he played the electric guitar the first time and got booed and all with that camera. And I was like, I got to have that one too, man. Come on. It's like Hendrix. I mean, this is the combining of my loves of my life, right? Rock and roll guitar and cameras is just, that's it. I've got a great shot of me. I toured with Jane's Addiction sometime in the middle of all of this crazy career. And there's a great shot of me standing next to Navarro, and I've got my 2C, and I'm like, yeah, and that also being able to be on stage again, this time with the camera. So I had very little responsibility as far as, actually having to pull off playing the song. It was a hell of a lot more fun. And I could get the same rise out of the audience as say Perry Farrell could, because I turned the camera at them and they're all, right. Yeah. So
And they didn't all have their own cameras, so
No, now they do. Now they, Dave probably has a GoPro taped to the headstock, so why wouldn't he? But yeah, lenses. Here's when I first kind of realized that there was something special in lenses was when I was shooting with Dave Myers, and I was shooting with a Bell & Howell 2709 camera, and we did this song for Master P called "It's So Hard." Something about losing your homies, and so they were losing their homies. So there was a shot of this grandmother at this funeral, right? And she had this hat, and the hat had a white band on it, right? And the sunlight was it was like speckled sunlight coming through the trees, and a little bit of sun was hitting that. And this old lens that I had, which I think was a Zeiss, it flared in such a spectacular way. The headband itself kind of like stretched out like this, and I was shooting, and I was varying the shutter angle as I was shooting and doing all kinds of crazy stuff. And that was I was like, oh my God, the lens is really the thing. Yeah, the cameras are great and all, and the film is great. Back then, I'd be film. Is it Kodak? Is it Fuji? What am I going to use? Fuji has better blacks. Kodak is overall probably a better film stock, but less grain. Same with the lenses. And when I started putting the lens collection together, I started kind of losing my mind. Like, I've got useless stuff. Now, here's a big anamorphic projection lens that's just anamorphosis, right? And I'm like, okay, so I'll take this, and then I'll get like a back attachment for this, and I'll get it. And I'm like, what am I doing?
People are doing that a lot these days. Like there's a whole YouTube, I shouldn't sort of limit this guy to just being a YouTube guy, but there's a dude who
anamorphic on a budget.
Yeah.
I see. I'm all over that too. Yeah. And and it's cool. That's going back to the Blackmagic 4K, the pocket camera, being micro 4/3. You can do some neat stuff with that too. And there's some like the little Bolex. I think it's called Anamorpho. The thing that goes in front of a Bolex Switar lens, it's just like the early CinemaScope attachment that went in front of a regular prime lens. You have to focus on both. That on that 4K camera looked mad. It looked like literally like some sort of artwork. It looked like a Van Gogh or something, or maybe perhaps even a Matisse, in that the pixels and the way that things are breaking up, and the way that lens, which is really old, and the second lens in front, which is really old and has all these elements, and the balsam is probably separating somewhere inside there and all. It just created the most impressionist sort of images I'd ever seen. And, I've only achieved that with a modern camera by doing this. I have a Graflex camera, and that Graflex, which is a 4x5 camera, and that Graflex is built onto an iris rod type system. And I take a macro 35 millimeter lens and put it on my camera, and then put the Graflex on the front, and then focus on the ground glass. Right.
Yeah. And like the old Lettuce and like Red Rock units from when we had the DVX and all that.
Exactly like that. And then use that as my camera. And there's you have to flip the video image because, it's an upside down image and all. But the image that's on a ground glass, this is one of the things that appealed to me so much about film cameras, especially a Panavision camera, was when you looked in the ground glass, you're like, holy fuck, that looks better than what I'm looking at out here. The projection of that.
My RZ67, whenever I'm looking in the top of that, it looks like I show people, they're like, why does it look 3D? And I'm like, well, because it is the world.
Well, I'm still shooting with a Hasselblad, and I get that feeling, every day. So that putting a Graflex or any sort of view camera in front of a film or a video camera, especially video camera now, is just the most dramatic thing, because when you're focusing on that ground glass, it takes it to a different level.
Yeah.
It's something that you don't see every day, and it's beautiful. And to your listeners, if you haven't tried it, you got to try it. You got to at least check it out. Even if you just get like, an old Mitchell viewfinder, which has a lens in the front and a ground glass in the back, and focus in on that, you'll see what I'm talking about. And it's gorgeous. Jackson Rose, who was the guy who wrote the first
2 or 3 ASC handbooks back in 35 was the first one. We took in his collection recently of stuff, and one of them was a Graflex. One of the Graflexes that you look down into like a leather kind of a teepee type thing that comes up the top, and the ground glass is down there. It's weird. They hadn't figured out the looking in the back part yet. You're still looking in the top. And I took his camera and I essentially really spent a lot of time cleaning the lens, cleaning the interior of the camera, cleaning the ground glass. Then I set it up and I took my old janky A7S camera, which I have a Nikkor 55 millimeter macro lens for, and started
this
shooting.
This is a Nikkor 50.
There you go. Beautiful. Let's come back to Nikkors. Yep. And I shot some images in it, and people are just like, what in the hell is that? How do you do that? How did you get that effect? That's insane, because it's a 120-year-old lens and a ground glass that, I grind my own ground glasses for some of my cameras, but
wow,
the look of it, it's really cool. It only takes a couple of silicon carbide, a 600 and a 400. I'm looking at them right now. And some really thin glass, and you just grind one side of it. And it's cool as shit, and it works. But let's talk Nikkors real quick, and we'll get back on track or be done. I don't know. Nikkor lenses are some of the best lenses ever made. Okay, especially
I've got a full set because of my f2.
Then I have a full set sitting over here too. I guess there's 7 sets of lenses over here. I'm about to send them off to have them rehoused. Okay,
who's doing that? TLS.
No, it's a White House, White Point.
White Point. Yeah,
yes.
Sure.
So I just got the quote back the other day, and I'm like, oh, okay. Well, there goes. Sorry, honey, no turkey for Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
It's gonna be spam again. So the images that I shot. My first professional still camera after the rock and roll days was a Nikon. It was like FM2, and I started buying the Nikon lenses, and I fell in love with that look. And to me, the great bridge between vintage glass and full frame cameras is the Nikkor lenses.
Yep.
I mean,
100% agree.
They're gorgeous, and they'll shoot full frame clearly. And as a matter of fact, that's what we used to have at Paramount when for our VistaVision cameras, the ones that they sent off to Greg Beaumont and Richard Edlin and all those guys that were doing Star Wars and all. Was we had Nikkors fitted to them, and there were Nikkors fitted to them, and there were some of them. Some of the cameras had Hasselblad lenses with the shutter system removed, and we're using those lenses. But I just really feel like if I get that set of Nikkors in every focal length that I want, then I'm done. I feel like that's me. So.
Well, people are so like, oh, we need the Canon FDs. We need the Canon FDs. And I'm like, yeah, that's a look. But like, no, I see we're kind of giving away my secret now. Cause like I keep that I primarily shoot when I'm doing like most things, honestly, unless I need autofocus. I shoot on the Nikkors on my C500 and everyone always goes like, what the fuck did you shoot that on? And I'm like, my secret.
Yeah, well,
it's, and an Anamorph X. I have that lettuce Anamorph X from a while ago.
Yeah,
slapping those two things together is a look.
That's really cool. The Nikkors, in my opinion, just can't be beat, man. They're absolutely, and I have my set is absolutely pristine. I have my old set that I'm not gonna get rehoused, and then over the past 6 months or a year, I bought a new set off of eBay from Japan. They're not expensive.
They take so good care of them. And yeah, they're like $200 to $500 unless you want like the 80 1.4 or whatever it is.
Right, yeah, that one's the 85 1.4. Yeah, that's the expensive one. But all the rest, I don't want that 1.4. I like the 2. The 85 T2 or F2 is a great lens. But the lenses are mint. Absolutely. When they say, you check the seller's ratings and all, they're good. When they say it's mint, it's mint. And I have a full set that is absolutely brand new. Sadly, they're going to be yanked apart and stuck into new barrels, but I can't wait. And when I get them, I'll have to let you check them out.
Yeah, absolutely, dude. I'm going to have to go buy a second set before we release this and everyone else
I know they're going to be
snatches them up.
They're going to be gone. They're going to be like the Canons, the K35s. Yeah.
I was talking to Alex Nelson of Zero optic, and he kind of started on rehousing those Nicords and stuff. And I was worried about that because we were talking about it. I was like, oh fuck, are people going to buy these up if we start talking about it?
Yeah. Alex is a great guy. Alex is also a lens genius. Okay.
Oh,
He's wonderful. And he and I had actually discussed long before this new book came out. I said, there should be a book about vintage lenses. Oh, whoops. I guess I'll let that one go. But there are just so many things you can do when you're shooting. You know what I mean? And there's not that many things you can do. You can sleep, eat, pat your kids on the head, sign a check, and go back to work. That's about it. So, and I'm not knocking it. I love my job, man. I tried lots of other things. I did curb and gutter for a couple of months. That was fun. And for 1 week, I did sod rolling.
Oh, yikes.
Yeah, where they come with a machine and they kind of like cut under it a little bit, and then you walk behind it and roll. Oh man, that was the bottom. When I hit that one, I'm like, okay, there's got to be something else.
Yeah, so. Hanging drywall is definitely an eye-opening experience.
Oh God, that's brutal. That's hard work, man. If you could do that, more power to you.
I did a day. We shot 6 pages. I was the second unit. We were just full cleanup crew, and I had a RE Mini, and it had no shoulder pad, and I was just hand holding it the whole time on my shoulder. Came back with bruises. Everything felt pinched. It was all fucked up, and didn't recover for like 5 days. I mean, my shoulder didn't really feel good for like 5 days. I would much rather do that than hang drywall.
Absolutely. When I worked for Roger Corman, we did a ton of stuff. We didn't have a dolly, so we did a ton of handheld stuff. And we were shooting with a BL4. A BL4 weighs, I don't know what, like 60 pounds or so. And then you put a 1,000-foot mag on it, so it weighs 75 pounds. Yeah. And, all day for 14, 16, 18 hours at Corman. When you signed on to Corman, you were there for 25 hours for the day. That's $60. And my back is jacked from it. We did a scene where it was the end of the night, and the director's like, please, can't you just hop in the car and drive down Main Street here in Venice and let the actor drive and just get a shot of him driving? I'm like, oh, all right, let's do it. Go out. It's midnight. He's zipping down Main Street. He hits a little pothole and freaks and hits the brakes, and I went through the windshield with the camera.
Oh, fuck.
Whoosh. So I'm laying on the hood of the car. He drives me back because I'm through the windshield. They drive back to the studio, and everybody runs up. Right? And the director runs over and goes, is the camera okay? I'm bleeding out of my head, right? I'm like, He's like, is the camera okay?
Jeez, priorities.
Fine. Well, of course, and an airy camera can go through hell. They're bulletproof. Those old BLs are bulletproof, man. Drive 10 penny nails with them. So
for sure. Well, I've been thoroughly enjoying myself. We'll have to do a part 2, or I'll hang out or something.
Yeah, please.
But we'll let you go. I end the podcast usually with the same 2 questions. We've kind of blitzed both of them, but I'll say if you can recommend, this will be the 2 questions. If you could recommend a film, perhaps education book, or a film book that you think people should read, and a film that today you think people should watch.
Yeah, I think you should most certainly get the new ASC handbook. The American Cinematographer handbook is required reading. It's addictive. It's technical. It's very, very technical. So, but there are lots of nice pictures too. And it's a phenomenal piece of work. And if you have that in your kit, you'll never be without the answers that you need. They're always there. And the second was recommended film.
Yep.
Boy, there are so many extraordinary films in the world and over the past many years, but I would say, truthfully, anything by Vittorio Storaro, Roger Deakins, the early works of John Toll, anything by Conrad Hall Sr., practically anything by Vilmos Zsigmond, anything by Nestor Almendros. It kind of goes on and on and on. There's so many great cinematographers. I mean, Gordon Willis's work is unsurpassed. If you look at Godfather 1 and 2, and then force yourself to look at Godfather 3, but just turn the volume off on 3. Just watch the imagery. You'll see that this man over a decade or more was capable of maintaining a look that you can't tell which scene was shot when. you know?
Yeah.
So his work is incredible. Even his work with Woody Allen, even though that's a hot topic these days, his work with Woody Allen is astonishing. And, you know, I guess, and obviously Blade Runner. Watch Blade Runner. Get to that, but you know, there's some other things. There's a lot of like indie movies that have a lot of weight to them that are really, really great. And I would say that I don't know, you know, John Alonzo, who was an incredible cinematographer and a bit of a cranky dude to me a couple of times, but an incredible cinematographer. You know, he actually shot at Roger Corman too. If you can dig up any of his early stuff, it's interesting for me to see works of a cinematographer early in his career when he had no money, what he's capable of doing, and then later in his career, if his career continued, where he has a lot of money to do things. Very often you'll find that in the earlier, more difficult and lower budget things, you had to be extremely creative to get your point across. Sometimes that creates things that are surprising, that are fantastic, you know, that you wouldn't have gotten if you'd had $50 million or whatever to have the sets made perfectly and spend a lot of time figuring out what you were going to do in the lighting beforehand. You know, so I really enjoy that. I enjoy looking at the early works of people. Roger Deakins, back to him, did a lot of documentary work. And if any of your audience is ever in Los Angeles and would like to have a peek at the ASC Camera Museum, I actually have Roger's 16 millimeter camera on display there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and you can see he graciously donated it to us, and you can have a look at his stuff, as well as cameras that belong to Caleb Deschanel and other incredible cinematographers, you know, like Steve Gaynor. I think there's one or two of them. Yeah, right. So, but hey, man, it's been a pleasure. I look forward to part 2.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. Peace out.
Take care, brother.
Frame and Reference is an Owlbot production. It's produced and edited by me, Kenny McMillan, and distributed by ProVideo Coalition. Our theme song is written and performed by Mark Pelly, and the F at our Mattbox logo was designed by Nate Truax of Truax Branding Company. You can read or watch the podcast you've just heard by going to provideocoalition.com or youtube.com/owlbot, respectively. And as always, thanks for listening.